Alright everyone, welcome to a very special video for 2021. You guys can all agree that 2021 was an interesting year in terms of video games. And for video games where, how do I say this, there were many JRPGs this year. There are many games to consider, especially the fact that the PS5 and the Series X put a wide variety of games. And today, I'm going to be showing you my top 10 games of 2021. Now note that I will be only covering the games that were released in 2021, and it will be depending on my recording experience and probably my watching experience from other people as well. So if you guys are expecting games like Hajimari no Kiseki or Spider-Man Miles Morales or like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, yeah, those sorts of games, like, they're not gonna be included in this list, sadly, because, like, one, it won't be fair if I judge them here, especially when I got my PS5 for the first time this year. But it wouldn't be fair if I judged them because, like, after all, they're just 2020 games, and, like, I'm not gonna put a 2020 game into the list, so let's get started. Number 10, Tales of Arise. Alright, now you guys are considering the fact that I might be putting this at the bottom of the list of the top 10. Well, for sure, it did win Best RPG in the Game Awards. It did win a lot of awards, or a few awards for like JRPG. But I wouldn't really consider this the best JRPG of 2021. So let's be real here. I'm gonna go and deep delve into this so you guys can understand my thought process. I played through this game expecting high expectations for this game to be very great, you know? It had all these characters that they introduced, they had all the gameplay mechanics that they introduced, which I really like. But I say the only problem with this is like the pacing. That's all my only problem is the pacing and the story. I'm not gonna delve deep further into the story at hand, so let's start with the gameplay first. Gameplay. We can obviously expect that this is the turnaround gameplay that we've been all expect for a while for Tales games, and they pulled through on that on the gameplay perspective. You had a lot of arts, you had a lot of like dual arts that you get to spam depending on the situation in the battle. You had a lot of movement between like new areas you get to explore, and especially the movement when you get to explore new areas, which is also very nice. And also the graphics itself, it's beautiful. I cannot stress this enough that how beautiful the game is indeed in terms of a gameplay perspective. And the way they introduce like quests and items and like also like new characters, I'm like, it's not that special, but at least they showed it. Now, let's tack on to the story. Now I'm going to discuss the story at hand. You guys know, or if you guys don't know, I did not have a good time with the story. And this will be a big of a spoiler, so like, when you start off pretty strong with the story, you were like, okay, it's going very solid so far. Like, the more we keep going, the more we're gonna meet new characters, and the more, like, how the plot's gonna progress, and, like, what the objective is. Nope. The more you kept playing, especially up to Eldimancia, all you're really doing is finding the lords and, like, either killing them or just taking whatever the thing was, which I completely forgot. And, like, we had to kill, like, all the 5 lords, of course. However, that comes into a big perspective, as in like, when you go to a new area, you automatically dismiss it already, like for no reason. They just don't introduce that area back into the story for whatever reasons, or the fact that it becomes very, very like confusing to know what the hell is the plot trying to go. Like, are we here to kill the 5 lords? Are we here to, like, destroy the planet, destroy the world? Like, I don't know what we're doing. And especially to the part where we got to Alphen's memories. They didn't tackle a huge explanation on Alphen's memories, or, like, his actual identity. I feel like if they cackled on his identity slowly, like at the beginning, few parts of the game, I would have been invested. But I feel like the memory stuff of this game was completely like, I don't know. The pacing was very confusing. You introduced like a character, Naori, and like I'm very confused who that person was. And like I had no like idea who that person was because there were no like memory flashbacks of who that person was. And like and then we go to the villain Volram. As you guys know, he is the main villain of this game. I say like the way they introduced him was completely at random. We never got like a villain where like he was introduced at the start of the game, where like there were like small glimpses of the villain, and then of course we met him during our first battle. But like after that, it was just like cutscene and then random like objective, random encounter. I'm like, and then once we get to the fight at hand, he just totally gets dismissed. We know nothing about him. We know nothing of him, and like it was just like downfall from there. That's why I had to stop from like episode 27, because like this whole sovereign thing, I don't know, man. How could I say this? It was completely rushed. This whole plot was so rushed that I can't give them credit for putting this at the top 5 of the list. I will give them credit that it at least deserves a top 10, but I won't think it's a top game in the world. Let's be real here. If you're delving deep into the Tales series, I'm pretty sure the last game, Berseria, was probably a better game, better explained game, better gameplay game, better story-wise game, and like better content-related game, because you had all these stuff. So I believe Tales of Arise, it just fell short from the list. Number 9, Persona 5 Strikers. Now, I'm gonna be going to a bit of a spoil sport for this game, so let's get the story part out of the way first. Persona 5 takes place after the events of Vanilla P5, where it has nothing to do with Royal. It's just the ending of P5, and it basically what it is just that we come back for our summer vacation, back from coming from home, and like we go on an idea of spread up what to do with our summer vacation. Here we met this pop idol named Alice. He gives us his card. We get somehow transported to the metaverse once again, and we got caught in another series of palace. But it's not just any palace. It's basically called a jail, and during that jail, we met a girl named Sophie, who happens to be a new party member. And also during our adventures, we also meet a guy who's actually part of police, Zenkichi. Of course, we don't trust him because it's police, so obviously. If we learned from our last game, from her P5 experiences, that the police are incompetent, of course, so let's be real with that. We go on this journey where we go towards people's jails, and apparently we have to get the desires back from the people if we clear out this jail. But that does mean that we have to, like, you know, reform the person, of course, which is actually basically any P5 plot, of course. And then we go on to this journey where, like, we have to, like, stop the other monarchs or the other jails from each different areas during our summer vacation, and like we gotta stop them from like from taking away their desires from other people. Then we go, guys, to Sendai or frickin' Kyoto or like many other places we go on along the way. And I say, like, the way they introduce the story and the way they introduce the characters' development and like more screen time for like a lot of characters, it's pretty fascinating, honestly. They introduce like new voice acting jokes, which I really enjoyed during this playthrough, which is like full on, like, probably a really great voice acted game, very great stream game too. Then we come on to the later parts of the story, of course, where obviously we expect, of course, the final boss is a god. Oh, look, of course. Let's get to the part where we had a great run-in with Akira, where he was the villain. I think he had a lot of great Iron Man vibes towards this, which I really enjoyed. Like, my time watching the Avengers Endgame movie, I think he had a lot of Iron Man vibes towards that character, and I like the way he presented himself, of course. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for like the ending, where of course we meet a god at the end. And I really didn't enjoy the fact that they just rinse and repeat the god strategy. I'm like, now this game is gonna take me down a notch because of the god storyline. But other than that, I think the first part of the story up to Akira was really good, except for the god storyline. The god storyline was just awful, rushed. It was unnecessary. Like, it was completely pointless too. Of course, we get the Sophia's backstory, but of course it applies to God because we don't need gods. So anyway, let's get that story out of the way. Alright, now then, let's talk about the gameplay. I say the gameplay of P5 Strikers it's okay. It was like, basically, you're doing real-time combat, which is action-based, of course. And then there's the pause, whatever you do in action. It's like it's like a bit of like Final Fantasy VII Remake, but a bit simpler than that, at least. So let's get that part out of the way. Now, I will say, like, a lot of the gameplay mechanics when it comes to exploring new jails, new dungeons, and like being able to like do the ambush mechanics, fighting mobs as well, solving puzzles. You got all that stuff, like your typical P5 nonsense, because like, well, we like those dungeon crawling mechanics. I like puzzle solving too. Even the added voice dialogue for like certain things even added a lot of flair to this game, so I guess I can praise that as well. Also, now then, here comes the typical flaw I had playing with this game. Unfortunately, when it comes to like bosses and whatnot, like if you're doing a first time boss, there's no way you can swap out a new party member. Like whatever party you have, it stays the party you just have. You can play other characters, of course, to like even help that even further, because having a wide variety of characters is actually nice. Especially like you get to play as them, that not just Joker as well. Like playing as other characters makes this a lot fun, of course. There was also like a lot of sequences where like you have to bring specific characters where it covers the weakness of a boss, and like I think the problem with that is if you bring out the wrong team for a boss fight, well, you're gonna have a hard time, of course. Of course, where your MC has like the many personas that he has in his collection is obviously probably gonna carry, of course. Especially with the fact that he has guns, he has multiple persona elements, all that nonsense too. And so I'd say like the gameplay perspective is alright. I just think like the flaw I have with it is like a bit of further into it. Let's talk about the items. We already know SP items are considered to be the most valuable stuff in that game. I cannot stress this enough, where people just want to get those weaknesses from using persona skills out of the way during battle. It's just mostly persona skill spam, let's be real here. When it comes to like certain bosses and we get their guard breakdown at least and lower its HP, it becomes a bit of a hassle having to like try to find like a scourge through every SP item you can find during your explorations. And like there is also like a team bonding skill where like if you get like you can increase the SP or the recovery of your items, which is like HP and SP, by a ridiculous amount percentage, which is pretty insane. Like I guess you would want to max that first. And also getting that bond level, like that level thing up, is very much a hassle. I suggest you get some skills to like make it go a lot faster than it is. Other than that, Like, I think the gameplay perspective is fine. I just think it was just flawed. So that's about it. Number 8. Super Robot Wars Sturdy. If we're talking about JRPGs and weeb stuff and like kaijus and mechs, this is the game we're talking about. Of course, Super Robot Wars has started its 30th anniversary, and this applies to 30th anniversary, of course. Now, for those wondering, I did not finish the game. I'm trying to slowly pace out the game as much as I can and wait out probably the next DLC number 2, so let's get at that out of the way first. I say the story itself, a bit of a confusing state. There are times where like when you have to do a required mission, and then there are these filler missions that seem very pointless, but you have to do them because like, you know, content, you know. I say the main story stuff, it gets like a bit off track, like it becomes irrelevant at most cases. Of course, like the story itself, it's what it is when it comes to like filler missions and all, where like I actually like how they introduced the mission system in this game, so I definitely can praise that, of course. Of course, you got your returning units from like Super Robot Wars games, such as like, of course, the Gun Sword, or Code Geass, or freaking Magic Knight Rare. There are a lot of series from that Super Robot Wars 30 game that I could say, but like, I don't want to get too much delve into perspective on like, on what series are there, unless you go play for yourself. And I say it's a great game if you want to first experience it for yourself, to be honest. I say like, I recommend it. However, let's get to the part that it comes a bit flawed. It becomes very grindy. Yeah. I am currently playing on the hard mode difficulty, and I say the first like 50 missions become like pretty hard and pretty difficult reliant, especially with the rankings of the missions go from C, B, A, even S tier. I say once you start doing like B and above missions, a game gets very hard from there. Just doing C, it gets hard, but it goes a lot easier from there. One thing that they added is that, of course, you have our MC, a customizable MC. You get to control its skills, you get to like have your own mech, you get to have your own theme song. I will say, this game is a very copyright-based game, so like, if you do plan on playing it, streaming it, I do not recommend streaming it, because you're gonna hit with the DMCA stuff. And like, I don't like the DMCA stuff that they added on like streaming, so like, get that out of the way. You're not gonna get any revenue from it, but people just play the Super Robot Wars games just to have fun, you know? And like, I say that it's a pretty great game. It's just that you're not gonna get anything out of it through revenue, but I'd say entertainment-wise, you're gonna get a lot out of it. Problem is, right now, the game, of course, like I said, it's pretty grindy. There's so many filler missions. A lot of the white text related missions that I had to do, and it became like, these are like an hour long, and like, they're so like annoying to deal with. And like, once you get to the gameplay perspective of like moving your units around in turn-based combat, choosing your mech skills, choosing your spirits, you could easily have like a fun time with it, because there are many different ways. What they added as well is their customizable ship unit called the Dry Striger, led by Mitsuba. And of course, I believe what they did, they completely broke the system, because if you've been doing all these missions and you've been collecting all those points and like things to upgrade, of course you get to upgrade your mechs, of course, and also you get power parts for your mechs as well. So like, it's actually a nice touch, because like in the past ones, you never usually get to upgrade your mechs like, you know, all the way, or like upgrade much all the way. But in this game, you get to do it like pretty much depending on your iOS system, which is basically a lot saying you get to increase the upgradable functions of like your whole entire game. And I find the Mitsuba to be ridiculously broken. I say this because like there's a skill where I can actually have 30% reduced damage. However, if you combine getting a program skill with the guard, you can easily get this to like 50% reduced damage. So you could technically get 50% reduced damage in combat in like all your units. And there's also a skill that increases her command range. And as you know, with the command range, it increases like accuracy, evasion, even your things like guarding and what's so. And like, it even gives them stats and healing effects too. And I say like it's pretty ridiculous. The Niitsuma has so many upgrades, and like I say that's the most broken part of that game is the amount of upgrades you get. There's a lot of variety of characters in Super Robot Wars 30, but the chances are you're not gonna use all of them. You're gonna have to make some sacrifices to your team. You gotta use some auto-deployed units for like certain missions and all. So like, you might get overwhelmed with who a lot of the characters are, but you're gonna have a fun time with it. You can also check out the descriptions if you don't know what these characters are. And of course, the game is in Japanese, so the only way you could really get this game is from like a Japan or like Singapore, like PlayStation Store or eShop, because those are really the only ways to get them. Physical copies, you can get them from Play Asia, but the shipping takes very long, so I wouldn't really recommend it unless like you really want to get the physical copies and you really want to wait that long. So I say it's a pretty good game for 2020. Number 7, Shin Megami Tensei 5. You know, when I talk about Shin Megami Tensei 5, I talk about when it was first announced during the beginning of 2017. I was like, oh, we got an Atlas game exclusive for the Switch? I can't wait for that game. And then like, we kept waiting every year. Eventually we reached the point of like 2021 or 2020 where they announced the trailer. And like, finally, I'm like, I don't know what the hell took them so long, but we finally got SMT5, and how did it turn out? Well, it's actually one of the better SMT games. But I will say, it is kinda like just all turn-based combat. So let's first get started with the story. The story, of course, is you're a protagonist. You start off with like school and everything. You meet a bunch of people. Then all of a sudden, like this quake happens in a tunnel, and you get transported into a demon world full of demons and like full of law and a lot of chaos of a lot of stuff. And like, you introduce your first experience of turn-based combat where you meet a guy named Ogami, where he turns out to be a Nahobino, and you become a Nahobino to like fight off these demons. You can also just recruit them as well, so that's out the way as well. You can explore a lot of the area, you can do quests, you even can try to like battle so many bosses, even do save points, find all Mimon, and all that stuff for your typical SMT5 gameplay. So let's talk more on the story. And of course, when it comes to the story, it's all basically a matter of law, chaos, neutrality, even true ending as well. So like, I say the story itself, it's basically your typical SMT storyline. It just really depends on the actions you choose, of course, when it matters at the end, of course. Where you can either choose law, chaos, neutral, hell, even the true ending if like certain conditions are met, of course. Then we talk about like character design. I say character design, it's alright. There's nothing that really stands out except for like the demons. I say the demons in like 3D retrospect look amazing. And they even use like lore from the demons, like even the newly ones I've never heard of before. We get to know their lore as well. You can get at least over 200 demons. You can even use DLC if you like to make your experience even better. So that's a reason to get the DLC. I say the overall gameplay, it's just mostly like you have to be very smart at turn-based combat, and you gotta be very reliant on like the press press turn system, because like there are a lot of things that they nerfed from previous SMT games, but they even buffed a lot of stuff from SMT games like this one, such as that the matters that crit actually matters. Magatsuhi is actually matters the most here, because like one, Magatsuhi, you're gonna be collecting those in battle, which really boosts your overall battle gameplay, because like it'll help you like arise to the top going up against these bosses and like recruiting demons and whatever. Even the dialogue of this game, when it comes to like recruiting demons, is like top tier. Like you get like an instance between like two demons having a conversation with each other, and like it becomes the most fun dialogue you've ever seen, because the writing is amazing, of course. But I will say, gameplay perspective wise, it's not the most high quality gameplay, unfortunately. Like you could see it during like Switch gameplay, where you feel like it's instances with 30 FPS lag. Even loading screens are actually like rough. Even like trying to figure out where you're supposed to go is actually rough, because it's either too dark or too bright. And like, yeah, it becomes a pain. Because it's a Switch game, like that also like makes it downfall as well. It was like PlayStation, I would understand, but it's just Switch game, so I had to give points down for that. But overall, if you guys are into like turn-based combat, want to fight like smart battle system, of course, depending on what you choose. If you want to like create an army of demons of like, you know, at your disposal and like put them in combat, this is your type of game. I cannot stress that I cannot recommend this enough, of course. Like, this is a pretty good game. Number 6, Neo: The World Ends With You. You know, I say a lot about Game of the Years, and this was actually my prediction of this being Game of the Year. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case, because like there were many other games that like deserved that spot, of course. So we tack on Neo: The World Ends With You. Neo: The World Ends With You is basically the sequel towards the original DS game, The World Ends With You. Hell, even the new Switch content from The World Ends With You, of course, like, is applied here, because of course it's basically after that, of course. So anyways, I say let's tack on story. Story-wise, of course you get you're pitting yourself inside this virtual world called the, let's just call it the virtual world. Either way, it's not the real world, but it's like it's the underground basically. And you're in this underground, you're competing for a game, you're competing with teams, trying to get out of this death game experience and trying to do the objectives for like each single day. And like whoever has the most points gets themselves a wish. And you find yourselves at the heart of the matter, of course, where you and your friend are in this game. We also meet a new character along the way. We even meet recurring characters along the way. And like, we get to fight actual opponents, even fight other teams, of course, trying to get out of this death game experience. Technically, it is a death game, because like, if you don't win, or if you're last place, you actually die. Your whole team dies along with them. So like, it's actually pretty like nuts. And then we introduce the characters. I say character-wise, they're pretty good, honestly. Like the art design of the characters, the game design of the characters really thought out. Like, it looked like the visual novel perspective, but like the visual novel is very stylish. And then we tackle on towards like recurring characters, of course. I like the way they introduce recurring characters. I just don't like the way like how like the timing of these characters are like put into play, because like it takes away from like the new characters, like screen time wise, because like one, the original characters, they don't really show as much backstory, but once you really get deep into these new characters, you get to know at least more about them, at least. But not all the time, But with those little instances of dialogue between like quests and like perspective, you say you get to know your characters full around. I will spoil the game that this game lasts at least 3 weeks in like game time. No, not game time, but like story time. Because you have each day, it goes up to 1 week, and like you play the next game. It's like we do another week again, and then we do the next week again. Like it's basically same rinse and repeat, but with different objectives, new bosses, and all that. So let's tack on the next part, which is gameplay. The gameplay itself, really fantastic. You had so many badges to use, like once you kept playing the game, and like you had all these button prompts for what each badge does. You want to collect them, evolve them, level them up, and you basically make any character like really good depending on what badges you give, pins you get as well. And also the fact that you get to customize your gear and like get stat boosts towards your characters by eating foods and all. It becomes like very addictive gameplay wise. Like you want to play more of it, but at the same time you want to make so many different kinds of combinations of what badges you want to use, and like it actually becomes very interesting. You also get a team HP depending on the combined HPs of your entire team all into one. So like your team HP, you can either increase the difficulty or you can make the gameplay a lot easier if depending on the situation. I say go for at least normal difficulty if you want to start out. And if you want to make it harder, you could choose hard difficulty. When you choose hard difficulty, you'll get at least more pins, but those pins during your actual story time, you're not gonna get a chance to like level them up as much, because like you might want to do it like off screen, or like do a bit of grinding, do like at least gauntlet battles as well. And I say gameplay wise is pretty great. Especially with bosses. Bosses are very unique because they have their own transitions to know what phases they are. You get to know their attack patterns. A lot of their design of the bosses are like really great, honestly. Like I give them props for that. Plus, let's talk about how great the OST is. The OST itself, I think it deserves soundtrack of the year for this game. Of course, there's like a lot of reused tracks with remixes, but this OST is just bangers, of course. I'm just surprised that during the Game Awards that it wasn't nominated for soundtrack. But I think this game itself, for when it comes to OSTs and soundtracks, I believe this would be soundtrack of the year, of course. Of course, like, you don't really have to play the previous World Ends With You game. But if you do, you're in for a wild ride, because it might take us much longer, and there's no voice acting, but you just gotta go through a lot of light novel text perspective. And like, overall, once you get through that process and you play this game, you're gonna have a fun time with this game. Plus the fact that it's Square Enix, that's what even made it better. Unfortunately for this game, it didn't really get the amount of sales that you really expect from this game, since it wasn't as marketed as much, to be honest, but it is what it is. But overall, if you're looking for a JRPG to really play, I say this one takes the cake. Number 5, Shadowverse Champions Battle. Now we take a bit of perspective on a card game that is like, oh, you're putting a card game in a top 10 list? This is so fake. This list is so bad. I don't care what anyone says. A card game or not, it still makes it count as a 2021 game, and also, it actually is different than most of your JRPGs you really play. So like, let's tackle on the game itself. The game itself, pretty fun to play. It has like a lot of instances of like the original Shadowverse. Even though the current Shadowverse game is like a lot more advanced, you actually get to use like decks of like the first 3 like sets of the Shadowverse game itself. And so like, it's in perspective, you can actually learn how to play the game at the same time know what was in the original Shadowverse before it became like very complicated and all. But at least for a gameplay perspective, this game actually takes the cake when it comes to like learning how to play Shadowverse at least. So let's get part of this story first down. Story, of course, you have your typical MC. You get to either choose male or female, of course. And you start off with like you meet a bunch of characters, from the anime itself. I'm not sure if it's like similar to the anime because like there are new characters as well. I say it's only its unique story because I heard what people told me that the anime and the story are quite different. They're not basically the same, but they're like there, you know? So like yeah. When we played through the story, of course, you're determined to like have your own Shadowverse club. You meet a guy named Ray who owns the Shadowverse club, and he teaches you how to keep it alive. You also meet the president of our school, Kagura, who happens to be a really great Shadowverse player. Spoiler alert. We do our best to keep this thing alive, and our only goal with the Shadowverse Club is to beat the Nationals, of course. And if we beat Nationals, well, of course, we keep our club alive. So this tackles on the story of this game, where we go through many ranks of the game, go through a lot of like C rank opponents to B to A to S, and it keeps going on to even further ranks because like they make this stuff up. Like we go through a B rank tournament, an A rank tournament, an S rank tournament, and like we go through this process where if we go through each tournament, we get to battle more opponents that are like above our level or at the same level, and like it becomes very fun. Especially when you get new cards from like duels and everything. Like it's very fun to play. Especially like getting new cards from like actual opponents that you want to like repeat, because they get themselves a new deck and like new cards where you can even purchase from packs. Yes, there's gambling in this game, so like you can actually gamble for packs for cards you don't even have. Like a lot of it is rare, and then a lot of it comes from like a lot of the character stories. They did the character stories pretty decently enough, where like the more you go through it, the more you know about the character, and the more you play through it, you actually get to get their signature card, and the signature cards are actually broken for the decks you use. There are like 7 kinds of decks you can use, crafts you can use. I won't go into game perspective what they are, but like those crafts itself, whichever play style fits you the most, like you'll have a fun time either way with it, because you just want to keep editing your deck, or you find some deck codes to like, you know, figure out what decks suit your play style and find the easiest way to victory. Now, let's touch on like, of course, the gameplay perspective. You have like a set amount of HP where you have to lower the opponent's HP down to 0. Of course, you get to even have evolution points depending on the turn you are. Either you're going first or you're going second. So it really depends on if you either have like 3 evolution points or 2 evolution points during battle. And like it's pretty nice for like gameplay perspective in a turn-based battle, where you have to like use effective cost units to like summon cards to like figure out what effects it can do and what effects that your monsters can get from it. And effects from the enemy that is affected as well. So like, yeah, there's also that. Now, flaws with this game. The fact that if you're stuck on an opponent that you've been facing so many times, I wish they lowered the AI difficulty of this game. You're probably wondering, oh, but we don't need to change the AI difficulty. The AI is pretty smart and all. When you're dealing with an opponent that you really struggling like multiple times, and like you really don't want to like deck edit so much, it becomes a bit of a hassle. Like if you're struggling in an opponent, you get very stressed during that whole process. If you saw my whole Shadowverse Champions battle playthrough, I struggled a hefty amount playing this game. Although it was a fun game, of course. Like I had to like cut a lot of recorded parts. I remember doing the final battle of this game, it took me like over 8 hours to record, and I had to cut out 7 hours of content of retries over and over and over, and I'm like, I don't want to go through that. experience ever again. It got me to the point of raging very hard, having to like deal with insanity and cursing a lot. For a gameplay perspective, it's actually a pretty nice game because like unlike Konami, you don't see these type of games very well because like one, Dual Links, and like they don't push these types of games very well into like the mainstream, but like overall this game itself pretty fun to play. I gave it a like bit of a 9 out of 10 or 9.5 out of 10 because overall it's a pretty fun game. You get to do a lot. You get to explore, do many different kinds of battles. You even get to be a part of the tournament and like yeah, it's fun. Number 4, Ys 9 Monstrum Nox. We go into a bit of a different side of this, because this is a Neon Falcon game, of course. And we go back into the adventure of Adol, of course, where he goes on in a journey because he's an adventurer, you know. We go inside a random instance of going back into a prison, and then in this prison we're trying to escape. And then somehow, we get hit with a gun, and all of a sudden, we turn into a monstrum. And we get these cool powers that we'll be talking about a bit later there. And once we get out of the prison, we escape the monstrums. We can actually transform back into our original form, but the problem is like we gotta hide from the police, of course. And with the Balduk prison itself, like it's a pretty huge place, to be honest. Like we don't know how we got there in the first place. We only visited, but we only got ourselves caught from the jail cell. As we're trying to like find a way to escape and hide, we meet some other monstrums along the way, and we battle with them to stop these waves of like whatever a single singularity comes. Like a bit of monsters come out, we have to fight them off and stave them off, like to keep the area secure. And it's gonna be like that for most of the game as well. I will say, story-wise, it actually picks up. Like, it's actually a really good story, because it's a classic Ys 9. It's a classic Ys game, of course, because a very unique game, because it features a new engine from Neon Falcon, of course. You also get to explore the area. You even get to do many things such as climb, you get to fly, you get to use the third eye, you get to like go underground, get to do some power moves. Like when you explore more of the area, the more you get addicted to exploring and wanting to like collect everything. Of course, the run-in with the characters, it's pretty obvious. Like each monstrum that we meet, we know their identity, and you get to eventually know their identity, and like we get to team up with them. You get a total of 6 party members throughout the game. Like the more you play through the game, the more party members you get used to, the more playstyles you get used to, especially with their skills and all. I saw nothing wrong with the story ahead. I thought this was a wonderful thought out story from start to finish. Like with any Ys game, there is always a unique story that like gets everyone, of course. Especially like during bosses and like how to deal with the bosses, how to solve puzzles with the bosses, how to deal with the phases of bosses. Let's tackle on a bit of gameplay. Gameplay wise, I say it's really good. It's a really fun, oriented, fast-paced game if you're looking to challenge yourself. Like, I'm not a great action person myself, but I think the game is fantastic. You get to do a lot of like it's dodging, you get to do a lot of flash guards, you get to do a lot of skills that are unlike in your comfort zone. You get to do so many new attacks that very fun to use and very easy to use. There's many different playstyles for like each character. Of course, you got Adol, you guys got White Cat, you got frickin' Anamona, you got frickin' Kratos, you got many more characters that I won't name, but like each character has a unique playstyle. It has one of the 3 elements. Either you find their enemy's weakness and you do well against that weakness, and like you get to do well and fight off these enemies. You get to know their attack patterns. And the fun part about this is the boss battles. Like knowing their attack patterns and learning how to flash guard like on certain attacks is very addicting to use. But I believe the only problem I had, it became a little repetitive from time to time. Like with any Ys game, it gets a bit repetitive if you don't know what you're doing, or like if you get burnt out trying to like go through a dungeon and all. But overall, I say this is a very great solid game that deserves the 4th ranked on my list. And like if you guys want to give it a try, if you want to treat this as your first Ys game, it doesn't matter. Like you could try to play Ys 8, or you could play Memories of Celceta. Like, it doesn't matter where you start. If this is like your first, or like if you're a great Ys player, this is your game. Number 3, the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Now, I've only played at least 3 Great Ace games, which is basically 2 Phoenix Wright games and 1 Great Ace Attorney games. And I say, like, why are you still, like, judging this? Because you haven't played the second game yet. I will eventually get to the second game. It's just a matter of, like, a lot of, like, stress when it comes to recording. And, like, I never have a lot of free time. And I'm trying to figure out where the best free time is. And hopefully I get fix my sleep schedule, because my sleep schedule is terrible. But, like, anyway, let's get on with this. Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. A 3D style light novel game where basically you start off with Ryunosuke Naruhodo. You get accused of murder at the start of the game, and it's your job to defend yourself, along with your buddy Kazuma. You do many different things. You go through testimonies, you go through cross-examinations, you go through evidence, you go through many types of like interrogations, and it's a very fun thing to do. I even like the new feature, interrogate an opponent, a witness, note their testimony, see if it's flawed. You can see if the other witnesses are like fooling around as well, and you get to solve at least a case for like each different like case. Of course, I know I'm not making a lot of sense, but like you get to solve like at least 5 cases per game. Since I've only finished the first game, the second game will likely have 5 cases as well, like with any Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney game. The more fun it is, that you get to meet this guy named Herlock Sholmes. You get to even have a journey with the wonderful Sato, to your journey to Great Britain, of course, and you get to learn a lot about the law. You get to know more about, well, your journey, try to like figure out what you should really do, and you get to figure out yourself as a lawyer. You get to solve like a lot of the witnesses' cases in London as well. So I think that's the main point of that. And also, there is a really great case number 3. I think it's the best case in that game, at least. I think with all the other cases, I think case 3 takes the cake as the best case in that game, which I really like as well. They even featured a new feature which I really like, which is basically the jurors, which really has a really cool OST. In the jurors OST, you get to interrogate them, figure out which like 2 statements are like put together and what are flawed. You get to press them for like info for like each one, and like the more you go through these juror things, the more you get used to it over time to figure out which pairs well with who, which pairs well with who. And like it gets very addicting over time, knowing about these jurors, of course. And then you got your sense of prosecutors. Of course, you start off with Aochi, with the prosecutor. It's not a surprise there, like any tradition, of course. And then you start off with the famous Von Zieks. I really like Von Zieks. Von Zieks is a really great character. He was able to be a freaking prosecutor very well because he's actually goddamn smart. There were like cases where I get very shocked about certain outcomes. It really is unpredictable when it comes to knowing the outcome, because you never know what the real truth is unless like you figure it out for yourself. You can't just predict that the truth may be well within reach unless you figure out that truth. And yeah, I say it's a great solid game if you never got into the Ace Attorney series. This is at least your first game trying into it. I say it's a pretty good game to start off with. That's why it deserves number 3. I say this as it deserves number 3 because of like how well it's thought out, from like the graphics, the 3D, the pacing, the freaking new characters you meet throughout the game. Even the goddamn evidence is a lot more advanced than like your usual Ace Attorney games. And like, I know this is like in the 1900s, but this is a fantastic game to get through, and I hope to get to the second game, hopefully. Number 2, Scarlet Nexus. Now you're probably thinking, why am I putting this game that high on top of my list? Well, I say this game blew me in every way possible. And I'm still doing the Yuito route still, but this game itself, really good. Probably one of the top 3 JRPGs I've played for 2021. I say it's a very solid game if you're looking for a Bandai experience. And like, you get to know 2 different MCs. The first you start off with is either Yuito or Kasane. I chose Kasane because like, 1, I like female MCs, and 2, I think the plot is way much better if it's on Kasane route than Yuito route. And during my time when playing this game, I find it very very enjoyable. Comes to like knowing the characters, knowing the gameplay aspects of the game, especially the basics, getting to use SAS with your teammates, getting to have like interesting amount of events to do with your teammates each phase, and like get to know their skills, you get to borrow more SAS from people, you get to have exhilarating battles. This overall is like one of the best JRPGs I played for 2021. It gets more fun from there. Like no matter which character you start off with, the story itself, it'll play into like a separate side. You get Yuito's side, Kasane's side, you face different types of boss battle, you go through different types of maps, you go through different types of Bonnie events, you go through different types of like quests and like new enemies, and like using their SAS, of course, especially when the two paths do eventually converge throughout the story. The more you play, you get to do a lot of new stuff. I'll give props to the voice acting. Voice acting, phenomenal. When you connect with this game, I feel like the voice actors really do make the character feel very alive, like the more you play. And I believe that when I played this game, I immediately thought, oh, there's no way Tales of Arise would beat this. And actually, Tales of Arise was pretty bad for me, and I believe this game was like top the chain, very top the chain, especially when it comes to combat, addicting combat, doing their brain crushes, of course. Get to do brain fields. The more you kept playing, the more you get interested in these characters. You even do their bonding events each phase, and you get to know more of the character from each of the MC's side itself. You get to do team bonding experiences. I know I'm only doing like the DLCs for bonding. I haven't like got to any of the DLC bonding stuff. But if I do get to it eventually, I will say I'll have a pretty fantastic time, because the bonding events are already good in that game. But DLC bonding events, costume, yeah, itself was a really fun experience. I actually do like the skits better than Tales of Arise, because in this game the skits are actually unique because it's, well, Scarlet Nexus and not Tales. I do think the skits itself were pretty fun. It even carries on your accessories towards even your costumes towards your skits, which made it even more fun. Like a switch between either 2D pictures or 3D animation. Like overall, I say over the game with a solid story, a game with solid gameplay, really solid gameplay, really fun characters, really solid character building and development. I say this is like one of the best games of 2021. Number 1, Lost Judgment. Now, we're finally at number 1. I know I've said this a lot, but out of all the other games that blown my mind on this list, I say Lost Judgment is probably the best game for me of 2021. So let's get right into it. Lost Judgment is basically another Yakuza game, of course, which is basically your spin-off of the Yakuza games, but it doesn't really like fall into the mainline Yakuza, but it's just a spin-off. But either way, it has a lot of Yakuza mechanics that you're used to. This is my 10th Yakuza game I've played so far, because I played all the way from Yakuza 0 to Like a Dragon, and the previous game for this game is actually Judgment, which is basically the sequel Lost Judgment. You start off with, after the sequel of Judgment, with the set of characters. You get Yagami, you get Kaito, you even get the judges from Genda Law Office, and you start off with like some interesting gameplay of like trying to solve a case by tailing, sneaking around, trying to follow them, doing some fun combat, parkour combat. I say with this game's combat, it has improved way dramatically from the first game. Like, I couldn't say that enough. The combat itself, really high quality, really fun, really addicting to like get those new moves that you want to get, of course, for your character. Testing out new different kinds of sets. We talk about this, and they introduce a new fighting style other than your usual Tiger and Crane style, which is basically Snake style. Snake style, probably the best style out of all of them. Don't get me wrong, all the other styles are pretty great, but I believe Snake style itself is like one of the best. Snake style is basically like you grab your opponent and you do a lot to them than just grabbing. You can even disarm a person from their weapon. You get to even like do a lot of really fun attacks when it comes to disarming your opponent, trying to at least kill them, but you don't actually kill them. Yeah, the more you play through it, the more it becomes fun over time. But let's talk about more on the main aspect of the story. We go into a case where the case goes into a very dark turn, where it goes from just a random ass traffic case or like sexuality case to a murder case just instantly, and it had something to do with a certain school, and the main purpose of it was bullying, of course. Of course, we go to Ijincho, where the incident took place, of course, and we explore Ijincho just like a dragon, and we go through many different kinds of things. We get to have a team that infiltrates the school. We get help from the school that wants us to deal with bullying, of course. But the bullying itself becomes a major problem with this story, is the reason how it's causing all these motives to happen. You even meet a guy named Kawana, who happens to probably be one of the better characters I've seen in many Yakuza games, because he's basically a living meme towards bullies. Aside from like story aspect, there is also a side school story aspect. Like if you do all the school stories from its mini games to its cases, you'll get to have a really fun story of like each of the cases. Like I believe one of my favorite ones was probably either the dance one or the boxing one, which are pretty much my favorites, of course. And you'll have a fun time just doing each of these cases and the school stories. You even connect with students of your school story, since you're basically a school advisor as well. And like you get to do so much stuff. You get to do at least some side questing. The best part about Yakuza games are its mini games. They keep making up. Mini games are always addicting. More the mini games you get in that game, the more addiction you get from just playing it. Yeah, we do a lot of cases to get money and EXP from. A lot of really good cases have really fantastic writing. Probably like more greater writing than like many other games you can actually play. Like I'm not gonna name more examples, Tales of Arise, but anyways, itself, like it's for the game, I say it's a solid 10 out of 10. One of the best Yakuza games I've ever played. It's quite up there near Yakuza 5. Nowhere near as good as Yakuza 0 and Like a Dragon, but it's definitely up there in terms of like, if I rank them, I definitely rank that above 5 probably. I will say it's a very great game. Whether you're into Yakuza, real action JRPGs, you enjoyed the characters. I say with the characters, it is kind of a meme with certain characters, but it doesn't take the overall flow of what the purpose was. Certain main characters who have conviction, who have their own purpose, sense of judgment, even new villains that have their own sense, purpose of judgment, and trying to figure out who are really the good guys, who are really the bad guys, and who are really the guys that are messed up and deserve to go into a pit of darkness, you know? I say itself, the game is like one of the best games of 2021, and I cannot stress this enough. The more you kept playing this game, the more you're like, oh, this is a game for 2021. Oh, this is a best game of 2021. Although I am very sad. I was so angry at the Game Awards for not nominating that game onto the 2021 games list, and it itself deserved to be in nominations, even freaking People's Choice nominations. I believe this game would be first in People's Choice nominations, probably not, but it is what it is. I'm technically mad, but I am technically mad at how they handled the Game Awards, because the Game Awards are basically the meme ad awards. And yeah, if you're looking for one of my favorite games of 2021 at the top of the list, this game is the best game of 2021.